So Eric, a caterpillar walks into a Mongolian bar. The cue.
A Mongolian Barbie.
Well, this really isn't a joke, because the caterpillar's designed according to its purpose, and it only eats the good stuff to transform or metamorphose into this beautiful butterfly. But it's already designed, that's built into it, to eat those good things so it'll become a beautiful butterfly. We have free will. Let's talk about that.
Free will to choose, but then there's a suggestion to choose certain things and to choose not to consume or engage in other certain things. Well, going back to the Garden of Eden, there was a complete array, like a buffet, like a Mongolian grill, of you can eat this stuff all you want to your heart's delight, but don't eat this. When you do, you'll die.
That pesky free will.
If there was no alternative, then having free will would be meaningless. So Elohim, in his wisdom, told us what things would be beneficial, helpful, good, productive, tov, Hebrew word tov, tet, vav, bet, you could analyze that word, and what things would be abominable. The word to abominate, there's two different words used in Scripture in Hebrew. One is that this will, you might say, degrade you, or I believe the word abominate, I think it's, if I remember correctly, but it's the same word that means a lump, or dull, or stupid, or thick. It's almost like describing a cancer, where the cells have ceased to function the way they were designed, ceased to allow a fluid metabolism, where you've got something coming in, there's a process, and then something going out, which is life itself. When the cells cease to operate that way, it becomes clogged. Traffic jam. It seems like the Creator himself has told us, you eat certain foods, you do certain behavior, you consume certain matters with your ears and your eyes to allow you input them, you allow your mind, your heart to process them, and then you export good works, good deeds, good thoughts, good intentions, good attitudes. But if you bring in certain things, they will abominate you. If you engage in certain behaviors, if you eat certain foods, you will become thick, dull, dense, clogged, cancerous.
So this ties in with where it talks about as one star differs in esteem from esteem, so also it is in the resurrection.
This picture of the caterpillar you mentioned.
And it also ties in with our last video. Choose life.
On the chart, the Erichtology chart, the letter Vav, down in the middle somewhere, it says caterpillar type, and at the Resh, it says butterfly type. Ben Yosef, caterpillar type. Ben David, Resh type. Why is that on there? What does that mean? The beginning of the aleph-bet shows you might say, the standard human, born walking the face of the earth, like a caterpillar, little tiny steps, eating green leaves. But then that caterpillar, which is subject to a type of what looks like death, he takes everything that he picks up, absorbs it into his own body being, makes a cocoon around himself, which is a type of crypt, a type of coffin.
And turns into goo.
It dissolves, they say, to where not one molecule remains of what the caterpillar, or maybe it turns down into the molecular level, but everything boils down to simply the elements, like you'd find on the periodic table. Here's just the elements, but only what he picked up and ate is what's encased in that chrysalis, which then melts down, but then it's reconfigured to be a butterfly. But you can't say, well, the head of the caterpillar became the head of the butterfly, and the feet of the caterpillar became the feet of the... No. It all boils down into a slurry, and then by the design of the creator, it reforms into this other completely different metamorphos. That Greek word metamorphos you mentioned.
Romans 12.
It's completely a different creature, but it's composed of exactly what the caterpillar chose to intake.
It really isn't a choice for a caterpillar, though. See, that's where this, like what we're talking about. We got the big menu up here, like we have his Moedim or Xmas, Ishtar, things like that. Are we going to throw those into our mix, or are we going to choose the things that bring us life and put that into our cocoon?
So the caterpillar, by instinct, you could say, or by program, knows what to eat and what not to eat.
We have to be told.
We were given that sentient processing consciousness of choice. So we were told, do this, don't do that. And then we can choose to respond by doing it or not doing that.
Sunday or Sabbath, clean or unclean. All these things that we're bringing into our cocoon with us.
So
to
people,
build into our metamorphosis.
I've heard people
to present
say,
before the Father.
I've heard people say, I'm not convinced yet, or I'm not convicted. Hey, we're under the blood, we can eat, we can observe anything we want. That's true, you can. You are allowed, by being human, to eat or do or consume anything you want. But there's a picture also in the aleph-bet. You've got the first 12 letters. Kaf and Lamed, the 11th and 12th, is teach and learn these instructions. I believe is that these Torah instructions, I believe is what that's saying. And then there's this letter Mem. Well, the letter Mem is this womb. It's kind of like the sarcophagus, the crypt, the chrysalis, the cocoon, and then Nun, that which jumps out. It's like, well, this has to do with our attitude, but it's the internal of ourselves. And I've said before that the way I see this is that the Nun that jumps out of Mem, the womb, like a woman's womb gives birth to another human, but this isn't another human, this is us being birthed out of the chrysalis unto eternity. So as us, the caterpillar, the Vav type, walk around like a caterpillar eating green leaves, when the butterfly emerges, it's no longer eating green leaves, it's drinking the nectar out of the flowers,
Indeed.
flying, and no longer just crawling on there. It's a whole different world, and the butterfly that we are promised to become is composed of only what we, the caterpillar, as the Vav type, determined to eat. So I would see this as saying every Shabbat we choose to observe, every Moedim we choose to guard, every word of his instruction, and I think there's a greater value in Hebrew than any other language, but every word we choose to eat from the tree of life,
Sweeter than honey.
becomes us unto eternity as we Nun, as we jump out unto, well, there's also the picture of the resurrection Zadi and the ascending up, Kuf, unto the eternal dimension. So you've got these repeated themes within the aleph-bet, sometimes repeated 2 or 3 times, where Mem Nun is a type of resurrection, Zadi Kuf is another picture of resurrection. But what I'm saying is, we personally gain the advantage. Personally, unto eternity, we become that which we have consumed while we're walking this earth in the ignorant blindness of mundane, stuck to the earth, caterpillar, Vav man type. So when Yeshua came as Ben Yosef, the Vav man, the caterpillar type, he resurrected, showing us the prototype of Ben David, the Resh man, the exalted, glorified type as a prototype of all that we will have the potential of becoming. But if we chose to consume that which he said would be, that it would abominate us, imagine having to wear the mistakes of your youth for the rest of your life. It would be nice to be able to shake that off. You know, I heard once that babies, they have a certain metabolism, but for them to transition into the next phase of being a little kid, a high temperature fever is necessary to burn the babyhood out of them. 104, 105, whatever that is, for how long it is, it brings it up to a certain boil. It's almost like pasteurizing milk, you might say. It burns out certain things. So where if the baby is not allowed to have that temperature for a certain amount of time, that babiness doesn't get burned out and they can't become this next phase of development. So of course if it goes on for too long, then it could be malproductive. But my point is, we have been given certain things to do, to believe, to ponder, to meditate on while we're in this form, this caterpillar type of us humans, as we walk, as we trod the grass and eat the leaves.
And get kicked by dogs.
And get kicked. But the resurrection, the hope set before us, will be this butterfly type like Yeshua showed us when he rose from the grave. And if we really believe that everything we chose to input into our consciousness, into our being now, both food and behavior and mental, what goes in the eyes, the ears, what we read, what movies we watch, what thoughts we meditate on, they will actually have an effect for eternity, who we are, and what, as you said, like the stars from one, how do you describe it?
Esteem
one glory,
esteem,
one esteem to esteem, one kavod. Not that there's like, I'm better than you, you're better than that. Better has not anything to do with that, but
Choices that develop that.
he seems to have given us the option to determine now in our ignorance, not knowing that we're making the choices for eternity, but the choices we make are for eternity. Whatever we choose to regard now, we will be experiencing the fruit of a jillion years from now. Every little thing now, which is so trivial, is huge, is monumental forever.
See,
and
I
if
think
we don't even choose between life and death now, we'll be wearing that forever.
I think that might have to do with like Christianity's concept of Sabbath. Like, what a waste of time. This whole time you just waste.
The interesting thing about Shabbat being keyed to the letter Zion, which is a weapon, which is the seventh day, it's almost like that fever. It's like, well, you have 6 days and then you rest on the seventh. It's almost like you're making ceramics and then you put it into the kiln and it brings it up to a certain temperature to bake in and to solidify what you did. He gave us the Shabbat as this, like that temperature the little baby has, like, okay, this is what you've done, now that has to be sealed, now that has to be brought up to a temperature of burning to get into the next phase. And so the letter Het, being this fence, illustrates this next phase, but it needs this Zion cutting off to finalize this previous phase. So each week, and with the Shemitah cycle of the 7 years, he's given us this thing of 7 to seal or to finalize, and based on that, we have this next thing set out in front of us. And by the scoundrel that Yahweh, you might even say, put up to it or allowed to modify his words, change his instructions to be from the seventh day to the first day, or from what he said to something other than what he said, he allowed that to say, oh, you don't want the truth? Fine, I'll take the truth away. Goodbye. Now you have to look for the truth. I gave you the truth. You detested the truth. Now I'm going to let it be cast aside, and you've got to go find the truth if you really want it. So the efforts that certain people make to say, hey, his name, his day, his Moedim, it's because we're looking for the buried treasure that he took away and tossed, and then said, okay, later on, your descendants will have to go scrambling with a desire from within to find the stuff that your forefathers cast off as refuse. That's what we're doing.
I mentioned this on Facebook a couple of weeks back about what Messiah said about, and it was on the Sabbath day when he made the clay and opened the eyes. If the Sunday folks understood the spiritual aspect of what he was saying there, that's kind of like that burning process of the baby you were talking about. It's like, that's what opens the eyes. That's a key that unlocks the door.
Something I noticed. I had a Seventh-day Adventist SDA friend way back when, and he kept bugging me about the Sabbath day, and it's like, come on, it doesn't matter.
It's only the fourth commandment.
Fourth commandment, so what? He did away with them, nailed them to the cross. But you know, it wasn't until I volitionally opted to observe the Sabbath day, just because. I didn't even have an inner drive, an inner motive. I had no reason. It was an obnoxious intrusion into my productivity. The Sabbath day I did not find to be a pleasant thing. It was just like, quit bugging me about this. But when I started keeping it, which is to say not working on that day, I went to meetings and thought, read, studied, but didn't work. The instructions don't work. It didn't say you can't go to church on Sunday. It didn't say you couldn't worship any other day of the week. It said do not work on the seventh day. That instruction. When I started to observe the instruction to not work on the seventh day,
Changes.
Suddenly I saw things differently. And then what I saw was these two letters in the aleph-bet, which are weapons of a sort. The Zion and the Zadi. Both those two letters were encoded as the seventh day Shabbat. One was also a picture type of the crucifixion, and the other one was a picture type of the resurrection. One was the cross, and the other one was the Ark of the Covenant. And when I saw that the Shabbat aligned with those two things, one stood for the number 7, to swear a vow, and the other one, the Zadi, was like this scepter of righteousness. I realized this is incredibly significant. Anybody who thinks to say it could be done away with or annulled or made void, that concept itself, to make these matters void, is the abomination of desolation. When I realized that, then I took to heart keeping Yom HaShabbat, the seventh day Sabbath, as an imperative, as an absolute, as necessary, of such great importance. How do we even give the words to do it justice? Then I did it from within my heart, and from that point on I started seeing everything in his kingdom different than I had ever seen it before. The Shabbat itself, as you said, is this key, the seventh day Zion outside the Het fence. Imagine, here you have a locked treasure box. What weapon can engage this treasure box to break it open? The key! The key is a weapon. The key is what opens the door. The key is like a siege ramp against a castle. The key is the seventh day Shabbat, and it opens up the Het, the fence of his name, where you go into and behold all that he's provided for us, which are then in his Moedim. And as I'm saying this, I'm picturing the aleph-bet and the letters and the pictures that are associated with them, and I'm trying to describe to you what I see. The seventh day is a key of entrance. Huh?
So much for 10 minutes.
10 minutes? That's why we had to keep the source. Well, we should probably end here and then let
Before
people
the battery dies.
Shabbat
Shut it
shalom.
off, babe. Shalom.